So this is Malika, a boat that I found in 2001. I'd gone out to the Vaal Dam, which is a water reservoir about an hour from Johannesburg, to look for the keel for a little buccaneer that I was going to fix up and restore. And Malika was standing with a keel in the mud, with a mast on deck, but in pretty bad shape and some burnt stuff on the deck. And I managed to find the owner, Mr. Neil Down, who owned it. He was in his 80s. And after a long thing, I managed to persuade him to sell the boat to me. And then I transported it from the Vaal Dam up to Honeydew, which is the west of Johannesburg, where I was living. And I got it there, and sort of the day after I got it to Honeydew, I went off on a delivery to take a St. Francis 48 across to the Miami Boat Show. Came back with the intention to get it built, and I was starting to rig up a structure around her. And then Duncan Lethbridge from St. Francis Marine invited me to come down to St. Francis and get involved with St. Francis Marine and build catamaran. So I did that. I went down to St. Francis. This was stored in Honeydew for a few years. From St. Francis, I moved to from France, I moved to Knysna. And then I made a plan to get Malika to Knysna. Got her up there, and I started stripping her from the cruising version she was to the day sailor that she originally was built to be. And with this, and then finding out from Neil, and that I found a lot of the history of the boat. So basically, she was built in 1933 in Scotland by McGruer Company, and King George V of England commissioned her to be a gift to the Sultan of Zanzibar from the British people, from Britain. And the Sultan at the time wanted a small day sailor, and this was built for him. So Ewing McGruer was the designer, and there was just one built. They thought they'd build more, then the war started in the 30s, and it was the only one built to this design. It's a 5.5 meter. So the Sultan had it for quite a few years in Zanzibar, sailing around there and just enjoying it. And then he died, and his son wasn't really into sailing, so the boat was stored. And in about 1960, okay, the revolution was in Zanzibar, was about 1961, 62, somewhere there. The Dar es Salaam Yacht Club got a note from the Sultan's secretary saying that the Sultan wants to sell the boat. And Terry Griffiths from Dar es Salaam Yacht Club, he went across and made a deal and bought the boat from the Sultan and sailed it back to Tanzania, where he took it onto a beach and did work on it to turn it into a small cruising boat. So he had two sons, and then he used to go cruising around Zanzibar and Dar es Salaam on the coast. And then unfortunately, Terry Griffiths was killed in a car accident, and a guy by the name of Dave Sutherland, who was a pilot in East Africa in Uganda, he bought the boat from Terry Griffiths, or from Terry's widow, and he sailed it down the coast. There's a long story, things happened. He eventually got it to Durban. He had it in Durban, and then the story is that he then needed to sell it to get some money to build a house. It was advertised in the Sunday Times for sale, and that's when Neil Down saw the advert and bought Malika. So she stayed in Durban for a while, and then he shipped her up to the Vaal Dam, where he was part of the Vaal Cruising Association. In fact, he was a Commodore there, and there are photographs of him doing a sail past on Malika. So it's got quite a deep history, and I eventually got it to Knysna and started working on it, stripping her down, started working on frames and repairing planks and just doing stuff on my own. I wasn't qualified as such, but I was just trying to learn as I went along. And in that time, I'd been doing, well, not working on the boat, but doing a lot of deliveries and things. So it just stopped. And then I moved it out of a factory in Knysna to this storage facility here. So that's where it is at the moment. And that's where we want to try and maybe find out some way that we can get her back onto the water. Okay, so here's an arrangement plan, and as it says here, it's for the 5.5 meter fast cruiser for His Highness the Sultan of Zanzibar, a scale of 3/4 of an inch to 1 foot. What was quite interesting about this is that what I liked about it is there's not much to the boat. There's no engines or massive cabins, or there's not even a head. It's pretty basic inside. So as you can see from the layout, there's just benches in the cockpit, which would be over here, and then step down to go into, well, sorry, the cockpit will be there. Step down to go into the cabin below, and in the cabin there's a folding table, a little couch, a sofa, and a folding chair. Was basically, that's all that's inside it. So there wasn't a lot to do there. So in the construction, the frames were oak, and it was done with teak planking. All the planking was teak, and it set a deck of sawn yellow pine. So it was pretty, it's 32 foot long, the waterline's 25 foot. And I mean, we'll see later that there's a waterline's marked. It hasn't got a very big freeboard. It's quite there's a lot of boat in the water. So yeah, that's the arrangement plan. And basically the whole boat in that shot. Okay, so basically I've got to the point now, I've had Malika for just over 20 years since I first got her and brought her home when I lived in Honeydew. And the dream was to have her repaired. Various things happened along the line. And then when I did start in Knysna building it, I was just doing it basically, I wasn't qualified to do it, just doing it by trying to learn and do things. And things have changed now that I didn't really have the time or the means to actually carry on with the restoration. So that's why I'm hoping to put it out there to find another way of doing it. Either getting somebody to get involved with building it, doing it as an internet, like a program, like people do these blogs of restorations. And maybe there's somebody out there that would be interested or have an idea of how we could take this further. I just feel that it shouldn't just rot away in a barn or a storage area, and it would be great to have on the water. I mean, it would be, often used to speak about where you could take it to one of the classics, like in Cowes, Panorite Classic or Antigua Classic Week, which I've been to both of them, and I mean, just to have her there would be amazing. But yeah, so there's lots of things that could happen, and if anybody's got any ideas or wants to get involved, yeah, let me know, and maybe we can do something. It would be great.